Text I got back from the dry cleaner that Thursday had 2 words on it: not ready. I stood on the sidewalk holding the little paper slip, already running 8 minutes behind, already calculating whether I could make it to the Riverside branch of the city library before my 9 o'clock meeting with a vendor who had a habit of being exactly on time. I could not. I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove to the library wearing the jacket I had planned to swap out, a gray one with a small coffee stain on the left cuff that I kept meaning to get looked at. That was how I ended up at the Riverside branch instead of the Main Street location I had used for the past 2 years. That was the whole reason. A dry cleaner and a jacket and a stain I kept ignoring. Riverside was smaller, quieter. The kind of branch where the carpet was a little darker and the light came through tall windows in long strips. I signed in at the front desk and found the study room I had reserved. A glass-walled corner room with a round table and 4 chairs that nobody was using. I set up my laptop, pulled out my notes, and had about 12 minutes before the vendor arrived. I went to the vending area in the back to get something to drink. Coffee from a vending machine is not good coffee. I know that. But I was tired, and tired is not a moment where you make principled decisions about caffeine. There was someone already standing at the machine when I got there. A woman, maybe late 20s, in a navy blue cardigan with a canvas tote bag over one shoulder. She was standing very still, staring at the machine like it had personally done something to offend her. I stopped a few feet back and waited. She pressed a button. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. The machine made a sound like it was considering the request, and then decided against it. She exhaled through her nose, not loudly, just the kind of breath that meant she had already used up her patience on something else this morning, and this was simply the latest item on a list. She stepped back slightly, and that was when she noticed me standing there. She did not look startled. She looked at me directly, the way some people do when they have nothing to apologize for, and said, "It took my dollar." "Which button?" "B4. The green T." I looked at the machine. There was a small paper taped next to B4 in someone's handwriting, out of order. The tape had started to peel at the corner, so it was hanging at an angle, easy to miss. "There's a note," I said. She looked at the note. Then she looked back at me, with an expression that was not embarrassment exactly, more like someone mentally adding this to a tally. "Wonderful. There's a coffee place 2 blocks down, Carver Street Roasters. They open at 8. I have a meeting in 10 minutes. Me too." She glanced at my jacket. I was suddenly aware of the stain on the cuff. She did not say anything about it. "I'll just get water," she said, and turned to the other machine. I got my bad vending machine coffee and went back to the study room. The vendor arrived. We talked for 45 minutes about digitizing the archive system for the nonprofit I worked for, and at the end of it, I was not sure we had made any real decisions, but we had been very polite about it. When I came out of the study room, the woman from the vending area was sitting at one of the long tables near the window. She had a laptop open and a notebook beside it and a water bottle that was not the one from the machine. Someone must have brought it for her, or she had her own. I noticed it without meaning to. I was already at the door when I stopped. I do not know why I stopped. I had a meeting back at the office at 11, and a report I had only half finished and approximately no reason to walk back into a library I was already leaving. I went back inside. I crossed to the front desk and asked if they had a dollar bill I could break into quarters. They did not, but the woman at the desk found a dollar in the lost and found box and let me have it with no explanation. I went to the vending machine. I put the dollar in and pressed B4. It worked this time because of course it did. I walked over to the table by the window and set the green tea down beside the woman's notebook. She looked at the tea, then at me. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "The machine was working again. I figured it owed you one." She picked up the tea and looked at it like she was checking whether it was real. "Thank you." "Sure." I left. For real that time. I thought about her twice on the drive back. Once at a red light and once while I was looking for parking. Both times I told myself it was just the kind of thing you remember when the morning has been strange in small ways and your brain is looking for a pattern. I went back to Riverside the following Tuesday. I had a legitimate reason. We were digitizing a local history collection, and a few of the original documents were housed there. I told myself that was the only reason. I believed it for about the first half of the drive over. She was not there. I went again on Thursday to follow up on a reference question with the branch archivist. She was not there either. The next Tuesday, I came back with a folder I could have sent by email. She was there, same table near the window, notebook open, laptop beside it this time instead of the other way around. She was reading something and making notes in the margin. She had a coffee from somewhere that was not the vending machine, which meant she had found the Carver Street Roasters, or she had planned better than last time. I went to the archivist first because I had actually brought the folder and I needed it to be a real errand before I made it something else. We talked for 20 minutes about scan resolution and metadata formatting. When I came out, she was still at the table. I walked over. She looked up before I reached her, which I noticed. "The machine is working again," I said, in case you were wondering. She looked at me for a moment. "You came back to tell me that?" "I came back for work. The telling you was a bonus." Her expression shifted slightly. Not a smile yet, but close. "I know. I saw you go into the archives." I paused. "You noticed that?" She looked back at her notebook. "It's a small branch." I asked if she came here often. The words came out of my mouth before I could decide whether they were too obvious, and I stood there for a second, wishing I could revise them. She did not seem to mind. "Most mornings," she said. "I work better here than at home." "What do you do?" "Contract research. Mostly for law firms." She closed her notebook an inch, not all the way, just enough. "You work for a nonprofit?" I had not told her that. "How do you know that?" She looked at me steadily. "The tote bag." I looked down. I was holding a canvas tote with the organization's logo on it. I used it for documents so often I had stopped seeing it. "Right," I said. "Yes." She told me her name was Simone. Not as an afterthought, but clearly, like names mattered to her. I told her mine. "Ben," she repeated, like she was filing it. I did not overstay. I had learned something from the first morning, which was that she was not the kind of person who warmed up to crowding. I said it was good to meet her and meant it, and walked out of the library with a folder under my arm and a feeling I had not had in a while. The particular one where a morning that started ordinary ends up meaning something. After that, it became a pattern neither of us named out loud. I started coming to Riverside too, sometimes 3 mornings a week. The archivist project gave me cover for a while, and then it did not anymore. And I came anyway. Simone was usually at the table by the window when I arrived. She had a system. Notebook on the left, laptop on the right, coffee at the top corner where she would not knock it with her elbow. Everything deliberate, nothing wasted. The first week we mostly talked about the library, which corners were quietest, which archivist was easiest to work with, whether the carpet was maroon or brown. She said brown. I said clearly maroon. She disagreed with such certainty that I spent a full evening looking at paint swatches online, trying to figure out which one of us was right. I still think I was right. I have not brought it up again. By the second week, she had started asking about the nonprofit. Not politely, the way people ask when they want to seem interested, but specifically. What period did the archive cover? What was the hardest thing to preserve? Whether we use MARC records or Dublin Core. I told her Dublin Core, and she nodded, like that confirmed something. "You seem to know about archive metadata," I said. "I spent a year cataloging estate documents for a firm in Cincinnati." She took a sip of coffee. "It was either learn the system or lose my mind." "Did you learn it?" "Mostly." She looked out the window. "I still lost a little of my mind." That was the most personal thing she had said to me in 2 weeks. I noticed it mattered to her that she had said it, and that she kept her eyes on the window for a second after, like she was deciding whether to take it back. She did not take it back. I counted that as something. She remembered details. That was the thing I noticed most. I mentioned once that I had a meeting I was not looking forward to with a foundation board member who liked to hear himself talk. 3 days later, she asked how the meeting went. I mentioned that I hated the vending machine brand of coffee but kept buying it out of stubbornness. The next time I came in, she had an extra cup from Carver Street Roasters sitting on the corner of the table. She did not announce it. She just looked up when I sat down and said, "You have a problem with the word no." Meaning you buy bad coffee every time because you refuse to accept the machine beat you. "I bought green tea that one time. For me, not for yourself." I picked up the cup. "Is this for me?" It was getting crowded on the table. I took a sip. It was black, the right temperature. She had learned that without asking. I asked her one morning whether she grew up in the city. She was quiet for a moment before she answered, the way she got quiet when something had weight to it. "Virginia," she said. "Small town outside Richmond. Do you go back?" "For holidays." She turned a pen over in her hand. "My mother still lives there." My father passed when I was in college. I'm sorry, she nodded once. He was a contractor, small business. He trusted a partner who turned out to be skimming from the accounts for almost 3 years before they caught it. She said it without self-pity, just plainly, the way you talk about something that happened long enough ago that you have found the factual version of it. By the time it was over, there wasn't much left. That's a hard thing to watch. It changed how I think about trust. She looked at her notebook. In professional situations especially. That was the most she had ever said about herself all at once. I did not push further. I had started to understand that with Simone you did not push. You stayed level, and if you stayed level long enough, she would add another layer on her own. Things I learned over those weeks. She kept a written task list even though she had every productivity app available on her phone because she liked the act of crossing things off. She did not like surprises, even good ones. She had a sister in Portland who called every Sunday. She thought most conference rooms were too cold and kept a specific cardigan at her home office for video calls. She could read faster than anyone I had ever seen, and she retained nearly everything. I learned that I liked arriving before her and watching her come in. She always spotted me before she reached the table. She never looked surprised that I was there. That started to feel like something. On a Friday in early November, I asked her if she wanted to get dinner. Not at the library. Actual dinner, somewhere with chairs that were not made for 8 hours sitting. She looked at me for a moment. That's a shift. From what? From library mornings? I know. She looked back at her notebook. Saturday, she said, 7 o'clock. There's a place on Carver called Elm and Oak. It's quiet. She was already there when I arrived. Of course she was. She was at a corner table with a glass of water and a menu she had clearly already read. She had changed into something dark green that worked with her coloring in a way the navy cardigan had hidden entirely. I stood in the doorway for 1 second longer than I should have. She looked up. You're on time. Barely. Barely counts. The restaurant was the right kind of quiet. Brick walls, low lighting, the kind of menu where every item came from somewhere specific and they wanted you to know it. We ordered without much deliberation. She got the roasted chicken. I got the pasta. We talked about things we had not talked about in the library because the library had its own kind of rules about what conversations fit inside it. She told me about a case she was working on. A contested estate. 3 siblings, documents going back 40 years, and her job was to find the paper trail that either supported or dismantled one of the siblings' claims. She talked about it with the same focused energy she brought to everything, and partway through I realized I had stopped eating and was just listening. You love this, I said. She looked at me. The case, the searching, finding the thing that was hidden. She was quiet for a moment. I suppose I do. I told her things too. About how I had ended up at the nonprofit almost by accident, a temp job out of college that turned into a full position, and about how I used to feel like that was a story of falling into something by luck, but lately it felt more like I had been steering toward it all along without knowing it. She listened the way she always did, like she was actually following the thread. Do you still feel that way? She asked. Like you're steering somewhere? More lately, I said. She looked at me and then looked at her wine glass. We walked out at 9:30 and stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant with the November air doing what November air does in the Midwest. She had her tote bag over one shoulder and her keys in her hand. This was good, she said. It was. She looked at me in that steady way she had. Same time next Saturday? Yes. She nodded once like that was settled and walked toward her car. I stood there for a second after she left. Then I went home and could not read or watch anything or settle into any of the normal evening things because something had shifted and I knew it and I did not know what to do with it yet. The next 2 Saturdays were good, better than good. She showed me a coffee place she had found near her apartment that was better than Carver, by a margin she described as significant. We walked along the river one afternoon when it was cold enough to see our breath. She had strong opinions about which bridges were architecturally interesting. I had not thought about bridges before that afternoon. Now I cannot cross one without thinking about what she said. The 4th Saturday, she canceled. A text, midday Friday, something came up with the case. She would let me know. I told her no problem and meant it. She was busy. Cases did not follow schedules. I went about my Saturday. I took my car in for an oil change I had been putting off. I cleaned the kitchen. I called my brother in Denver and talked for 40 minutes about nothing important. I was fine. She did not text Saturday, or Sunday, or Monday. Tuesday at the library. Her table was empty. I told myself she was busy. I had the archivist project still, technically, and I came in and worked for 2 hours and left without seeing her. Wednesday the same. By Thursday, I was starting to replay the last Saturday we had together, looking for something I might have said or not said, some moment where the tone had shifted and I had missed it. There was nothing. Or if there was something I could not find it, which was almost worse. Friday afternoon. My phone buzzed. Simone. A single line. Are you at the library tomorrow morning? I typed back, I can be. She replied, 10 o'clock. I was there at 9:45. She arrived at 10 exactly and walked to the table without stopping at the desk first, which was unusual for her. She sat down and placed her notebook on the table but did not open it. I handled this badly, she said. It was so direct that for a second I just looked at her. You disappeared, I said. I know. After making a plan. I know that too. She looked at her notebook for a moment. Then she looked at me. There's something I should have told you before we had dinner. Before any of it, probably. My stomach dropped in a way I could not explain immediately. She folded her hands on the table. I knew who you were before the morning with the vending machine. I heard the words, but they took a second to land. What does that mean? I was hired 8 months ago to do background research for a firm that was evaluating your organization as a grant recipient. Standard due diligence. Part of the work involved reviewing the nonprofit's leadership. She looked at me steadily. I found your name, your work history, a profile you wrote for a trade publication. I was very still. I wasn't assigned to your branch, she said. The main file was about the organization, not you specifically. But I had read enough to know who you were when I walked into Riverside that morning. Was that by accident? I asked. Walking into Riverside? A pause. No. The carpet was suddenly very obvious. Someone nearby was turning pages. Outside a car alarm went off briefly and stopped. You knew which library I used, I said. I had done enough research that I knew your general routine. When you weren't at your main branch, I made a reasonable guess. The vending machine. I was already there when you came in. I didn't engineer the machine being broken. That was genuine. She said it like she wanted at least that to be clean. But I was there because I had placed myself there. I looked at the table between us. The dollar, I said. You knew I would come back to the machine. I thought you might. You seemed like someone who doesn't like to let a thing go unresolved. Her voice was very careful now. I didn't expect you to get the tea and bring it to me. That was yours. I sat with that for a minute. The tea had felt like mine. That was the part that hurt most, actually. The part that felt most like me had been real, and everything around it had been a frame she had built in advance. Why? I finally said. She was quiet for a moment. Because the research had made me curious. That sounds inadequate. I know that. She pressed her hands flat against the table. In my work, I read about people from the outside. I know their paper trail, their professional decisions, their patterns. And occasionally someone's pattern makes me think, I would like to know how they actually are. Not their file. Them. So you staged a meeting. Yes. I stood up. Not because I had somewhere to go, but because I needed to be standing. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot and the gray November sky above it and the few cars that were in on a Saturday morning. Behind me, she said, everything after that was real. You would say that. I know. That's the problem. She did not try to make it easier. The mornings, the conversations, the dinners, I didn't expect any of it to matter the way it did. I didn't expect to cancel plans with a client to keep Saturday free. I didn't expect to care whether you were going to be there when I walked in. I turned around. Then why tell me now? She looked at me. Because I almost didn't. And the fact that I almost didn't scared me more than telling you. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said I needed a few days and walked out of the library into the cold and sat in my car for a while without starting it. For 2 days I was useless in the quiet, ordinary way. I went to work. I ate lunch. I answered emails. I had a phone call with the foundation board member I didn't like and managed to get through it without being distracted, which was almost impressive given everything. What I kept coming back to was not the beginning. The beginning was bad, and I did not want to make it smaller than it was. She had placed herself in a room because she had read enough about me to be curious, and she had let me believe the whole thing was chance. That was not nothing. That was a decision she made about what I got to know. But then I kept coming back to the rest of it. The way she had started carrying an extra coffee cup on the day she had decided I would show up. The way she had told me about her father, plainly and without asking for anything in return. The way she looked out the window for a half-second after, checking whether she had said too much. The dinner where she had talked about the estate case and her whole face had changed into something more open than she usually allowed. The Saturday on the river. The bridges. She had told me. She had not waited for me to find out some other way. She had sat down with her notebook closed and said, I handled this badly, and then she had told me the whole thing without softening it or explaining it into something easier than it was. That part would not leave me alone. On the third day I texted her. One line, are you at the library tomorrow morning? She replied within a minute, I can be. I got there first. I sat at the table by the window with 2 coffees from Carver Street Roasters, one black, one with oat milk and one sugar, because I had learned that too at some point without writing it down. I waited. She came in at 8:15. She walked to the table and saw the 2 cups and did not say anything for a moment. Then she sat down across from me. I need to say something, I said. And I need you to hear it the way I mean it. Okay. What happened at the beginning was wrong. Not because you were interested in me, but because you made a choice about what I got to know, and that choice was mine to make. I kept my voice level. I don't want to be managed. I don't want to be the subject of a plan I didn't know I was part of. If this continues, that has to matter more than any other consideration. She nodded. She did not argue. I'm not telling you I'm fine with it, I said. I'm telling you I understand why it happened and I'm choosing to be here anyway. Those are different things. She looked at me for a long moment. They are different, she said. Thank you for being clear about that. Are you going to be clear with me? Yes. Going forward? Yes. I picked up my coffee. Then tell me something true. Right now, something you haven't said yet. She looked at the table. Then she looked at me. I was afraid you were going to keep not coming back, she said. Every day, this week. I kept thinking, today is probably the day he decides it's not worth it. She turned the coffee cup slowly in both hands. That's the most I've been afraid of something in a long time. That's true. I looked at her. Outside the long library windows the morning was going on, people arriving, a city bus pulling past, November doing its ordinary work. I came back, I said. I know. We sat there with our coffees and the library sounds around us, and for a while, neither of us said anything else. It was the same table we had used since the beginning, the one by the window with the light coming in from the east. It looked the same. We did not look quite the same. Same time next Saturday? I asked. She looked at me, and this time, when she smiled, she did not pull it back. Same time, she said.